session. Next in line, we have a panel discussion on building a sustainable edtech startup. Our first panelist is Mr. Mohan Lakhamraju, founder of Great Learning, one of the India's fastest growing edtech startups. He co-founded Great Learning with a vision to make it a lifelong learning partner for young professionals and scaled it profitably with millions of learners across 170 plus countries. He is also the vice chairman of Great Lakes Institute of Management. Our second panelist is Mr. Sajith Pai, one of the partners of Blume. At Blume, Sajith supports investments in EdTech, HRTech, AgriTech, and B2B marketplaces. Sajith is a prolific writer. His writings cover startups and e-commerce to culture and education and have been published in Scroll, Quads, BuzzFeed, and the Times of India. Our third panelist is Mr. Rajiv Jayaraman, CEO of KNOLSKAPE, an integrated learning and assessment platform. KNOLSKAPE raised strategic investment from NIIT Limited in 2022. Over the years, he has built a high-octane team that delivers stellar technology-driven learning experiences for learners across the globe. He is also a visiting faculty at various leading B schools and has prior working experience at Oracle. This session will be moderated by Mr. Ravi Garikipati, co-founder of Davinta FinServe and ex-CTO of Flipkart. He's also a board member at NIIT, Access Mutual Fund, and 5paisa. He has also invested in multiple edtech startups. May I request the audience to type in their question by clicking on the Q&A icon. They will be answered at the end of this session. Over to you, Ravi.
Thank you, Neha. I really appreciate the intro and welcome the panelists. I must say the very eminent panelists, and like I said to some of you, just came back from a US trip, and I'm hitting the ground running. And the best way to get that thing going is to have this engaging and intellectually stimulating conversation with all of you. And hopefully, this will mean a lot for some of the young entrepreneurs out there who are dialing into this panel discussion. I'll give my opening remark. The topic is pretty broad. I think this is pretty relevant for any startup, and maybe we'll get into some nuances as to how to build a sustainable edtech startup as part of our panel discussion. But for me, simply put, sustainable business or startup is one where you're building something that lasts for I wouldn't say eternity, for a great length of time. And sustainability, oftentimes people refer to and the growth and profitability, but I think it's layered across many dimensions. How sustainable is the product or service that you're building from relevance standpoint? How sustainable the growth and profitability, which is oftentimes the most commonly referred when you look at sustainability, and then how sustainable the purpose and vision for which you come together as a founding team to build what you're building, right? And also the values and culture and the vision that you put in place. Are you staying the course? Are those elements sustainable as you're building and fast forward few years from the beginning? And also the talent, right? And are you able to sustain the same quality of talent that you had at time T1 when you're going through the 0 to 1 phase to where the business is heading, and seemingly in the growth phase and beyond? So are you able to sustain the quality of talent? So it's kind of layered across various dimensions, and at least in my head, when you look at sustainability, how to cover some of these aspects. And I do know from my experience, having seen few companies built both out of Valley and even in Indian context, looking at these dimensions very closely at different points in time, very diligently, I must say. And those ones who do that and address that carefully with a considered effort, they really stand out, and they truly become a sustainable businesses. So that's my take. I'm sure three of you will have great insights into this topic, and looking forward to engaging with all of you. I just want to tee up with one open-ended question, and understand, at very high level, your definition of sustainability as it relates to your businesses. Many of you build businesses. Mohan, you built a couple of businesses. You're building another one as we speak. And Rajiv, we just embarked on some exciting startup journey of your own. And Sajith, you've been at the forefront of investing many earlier startups, and some of them have gone past 0 to 1 and seemingly attaining that sustainable sustainability phase. So what's your definition? Is there any common definition that we can align to? All right. So I want to just make it open-ended and maybe start off with you, Mohan, and I'll go with you, and then hear others' comments as well.
Thank you, Ravi, and thanks to you and to NIIT University for having me participate in this panel. I appreciate being with all of you stalwarts. So I think you touched upon several aspects of it yourself, Ravi, in your opening remarks. For ease of, for simplicity, think about it in maybe 3 things. So one is financial sustainability, which means that, whatever the business is offering, in our case, whatever services and products that we are offering are making enough money, to meet all of our costs and to give us money to reinvest in keeping us innovative, to keeping us generating new products, to evolve our existing products. So we are not dependent on any external cash, right? So that's the financial sustainability part of it, right? So it's not enough to just break even. The business has to generate enough cash to keep the product engine and the innovation engine running, right? So all great companies have that. So that's one. Second is organizational sustainability. And what I mean by that is something that you already alluded to, which is that you have the processes, the technology, the systems, the know-how, all of that sufficiently codified, sufficiently implemented that it is not any individual dependent, right? So, we are not there yet. I think that's work in progress. One of the reasons me and my team continue to be motivated by what we are doing is because we want our organization and our business to continue to have impact long after we are gone, right? That's why we started this, so we believe in what we do and we wanted to keep doing it and compounding that impact, for a long time. And we are not there, and we are very motivated to get there. So that's something that we are working on. Okay? So that's the second one. Third is, in some sense, competitive sustainability, right? So how will you basically sustain in a competitive environment? And, so that's a function of many things. What's the reputation that you have? Like what kind of brand have you created? Is there enough pull, enough trust in that brand, right? So, and, is there enough quality that you have been able to engineer into whatever you're offering so that that reputation will hold you in good stead, regardless of what new competition might come up, and what threats the business might face from a competitive perspective. Can it sustain that, right? So I think if we have solid answers to all of these questions, I think, then the business is not dependent on any founder or individual or anything like that. So that's how I would think about it.
Excellent. Thank you, Mohan. That's a great way of teeing off. And Rajiv, what's your take? Are you seeing in your business some early indicators of sustainability? Are you still working towards it? If so, what are the areas? What is your definition?
Yeah, so tough act to follow after Mohan has structured it so well. I would think about it from similar lines, financial sustainability to begin with. Second is the business model sustainability. So much is changing in the world around us in terms of, EdTech itself, the technologies, the and the academic institutions, corporates. So much is changing on that front. And, from a stakeholder perspective as well, there are too many of them in the environment that we operate in. So if you take the K-12 space, broadly speaking, there are parents, there are students, there are academic institutions. So sustainability is, doing good for all of them, right? So that it has a long-term meaning. And the one keyword that I often think about when I think about sustainability is relevance, right? Over a period of time, how do you continue to stay relevant, right? And for that, there is an element of reinvention that needs to happen. And that to me is at the crux of sustainability. From our personal journey, we started off in India and APAC. Right now, the journey is taking us to the US and UK, and that's, as you know, in the corporate learning space, that's the biggest market there is. And of course, with NIIT, the partnership I have with them as well. Really excited to be on that journey to expand our mission of helping organizations and leaders become future ready through experiential learning. So that's the path that we are on. And yeah, in a nutshell, how do you continue to stay relevant over a period of time for so many different stakeholders? That's how I view it.
Thank you, Rajiv. Over to you, Sajith. As a VC, and having invested in many early stage startups across many verticals and domains, what is your take on sustainable business? And do you have any special regard or a reference to EdTech sustainability? Do you see that being very different from some of the other verticals where you invested? Does EdTech in itself poses certain opportunities and challenges that make us look at sustainability differently?
Sajith, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Thank you for this, Ravi. And Mohan and Rajiv have covered many aspects and they've kind of structured it very well. From a venture perspective, and specifically from the lens of early stage startups, but also seeing growth companies, we have an academy, we have Class Plus, etc. I would say that sustainability to me is when you have a business model, when you have a revenue model, when you have an organization that is on a path where even if you shut off any future tap to capital. So a sustainable company may be profitable, it may not be profitable because it may have decided that with the capital that it has got, an EdTech startup may eschew profitability for market share gains or in reinvesting in the business, etc. So it may not be profitable, but it is sustainable when, even if there is no future capital, it can quickly take the measures to become profitable. And fundamentally, the business is contribution margin positive, broadly in almost EBITDA positive, and they're only negative because they're reinvesting in the business. So in such a context, a business is fundamentally sustainable. A wonderful definition comes from YC, which has this term called default alive and default dead. Sustainable startups are default alive and default thriving. So this is sort of my lens through which I look at sustainability. It's not as erudite as what Mohan said, but I think it gets the job done for our startups, which, yeah.
No, absolutely, it does. Very well put, Sajith. Excellent, excellent. So with that, I think we have a common understanding, and all of us alluded in your own way, very eloquently, what sustainability should stand for, regardless of which domain. And I don't think the definition changes because we are dealing with EdTech as a domain. I think they're largely same across all domains, and very well put. Now, taking it a little further into a few nuances, Rajiv, I'll start with you. You embarked on this entrepreneur. I thought you had a few other gigs. Maybe you have read that incorrectly, and you corrected me saying that this is your first gig, and you've spoken like a very seasoned founder. Maybe that's what got me into that thinking. What is the role of product market fit when it comes to attaining sustainability? I know we all heard the importance of PMF, and every founder gets his head around that. Every investor insists on you getting a PMF in place and so on and so forth. Well, how important is that as you working towards attaining sustainable business?
That's a great question, Ravi. So I think prior to product market fit, there is a founder idea fit from a sustainability standpoint, right? Because we are in this for the long term, and if you're building this for a period of time, an idea needs to invigorate the person, the founder, the founding team, right? I find that to be incredibly important. Otherwise, you lose steam along the way. So having said that, I think product market fit, as we all know, is extremely important. Not from just from a $0 to $1 million perspective, right? Which obviously is crucial from a PMF standpoint, getting that right, because that sort of sets the stage for what's going to happen next. The learning that one gets during that phase becomes foundational for what the organization will do until the next milestone. But the tricky thing I've realized from the product market fit concept itself is that keeps changing. It's not a point in time where you say, aha, now I've reached this and this is all set. Because in our own case, from APAC to India, to now the global market, you take the same product, same platform, it may not end the same way. Even though we work with 400 plus global enterprises, large names in this part of the world, the same companies in a different geography might react very differently to the idea, right? And so the nuances there are very critical. Same way, the same product or platform we have created for the enterprise market, does it work well for the partner network? Maybe not, right? And so there are those instances where we need to go back to that product market fit to see if this is still relevant. Going back to what I was saying, as we expand, how do we stay at the core of it and never lose sight of the product market fit, or don't take anything for granted, because the external environment is changing. And that's where I think companies also lose the plot, because they take that as granted and then they start building the rest of the stuff. And then they realize that the core foundation itself has shifted. That sort of comes in the way of sustainability.
No, excellent point. I think you really hit a nail on the head. I think, while the core PMF will remain intact, and I think it should remain intact, but I think you're alluding to one important point where the product market fit will have to morph or adapt itself to various geographies, various customer segments that you're going after, and various time scenarios. What looked absolutely relevant from product market fit at time T1 maybe requiring some change at T2. That doesn't mean you waver from your core product focus. But I think being cognizant of those nuances is very important for sustainability. I think point very well made. Thank you. Mohan, and coming back to you, and you have built many startups, and all of them have gone on to become almost like institutes. And they probably are no better person than you to answer this question and provide you insights to some of the entrepreneurs out there on this call. As we know, the entrepreneurial journey is always founder driven. The passion, the irrational energy, exuberance that founders bring, and they're building something in the 0 to 1 stage, and they are there pretty much in every facet of startup build out. And then as they go past that, there is this conundrum that they have to grapple with. If you sort of take our eye off the ball, or let somebody else look at XYZ or ABC, things may not pan out the way we built up until now, and so on and so forth. And then without realizing, he or she becomes a bottleneck. So the importance of what I'm getting to is the importance of hiring the right people, building right processes, and bringing right systems in place. So most of things will I wouldn't say be taken care by themselves, but not wholly dependent on founders and few key founding team members. So I'm sure you've done it, and I would like to hear your insights as to how a founder navigates from 0 to 1 to this, and how that will help building the business sustainable.
Yeah. So I think, for me, people are everything. I think, people are number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, for anything. And this was, some conversation came up the other day when I was saying this. People build companies, people build organizations. Capital doesn't build organizations. Capital doesn't build businesses. People build businesses, right? So people are extremely important. And I think for any founder, for any entrepreneur, I think having a few trusted, dependable people are the best gift, the best asset that they can hope to have, right? And, at different stages, you need different skills. If you are lucky, the people that you have will transcend those skills. And if you're not, then you have to find new people. And, at some point you have to keep finding new people. Right. And so I think that's where I heard Kunal, briefly in the previous conversation, the culture and the values that you build into the organization, and those get usually determined by the initial set of people. Right. So, as an entrepreneur, I have a certain view. We are very mission driven. So I care deeply about what we do, enabling career success for people through high quality and, transformational education. And the people that joined me in this journey early on deeply believe in that as well. Right. And, we chose a certain set of values that we want to follow, and those we practice very deeply. Right. So, like culture and values are not something that you put up on a wall, or on a slide deck. It's what happens day to day when nobody is watching. Right. So that's what really culture and values are. So if that is strong, then the new people that you bring in, there'll be an automatic self-selection. Right. Because I'm not going to be the one hiring people all the time. Right. Like there'll be other people that will be hiring. So they'll automatically look for people who fit into that. When those people come into the organization, they'll start practicing those. And thus the engine gets created, and thus the propagation of these things happen. And so your way of doing things, right? So for us, let's say if quality is extremely important, right? So that message gets percolated. Everybody will do things that way, right? So, and these people are the ones who will then put in place the processes, the systems, build the technology, build the necessary apparatus to have the thing percolate and subsist over a period of time, right? And if the stories that get told, right, of what gets celebrated, what gets reprimanded, right? So those are all the things that keep taking this forward. So ultimately, you want this aspect, the culture, the values, the way of doing things to get so solidly codified that it then doesn't depend on any specific individual, right? So I think that's where you want to get to. But I believe, at least I don't know if it'll happen in our lifetime, where things will stop depending on people. I think that everything is all about the people. And if you get that part right early on, and if you can keep that without diluting, that actually, holds us in very good stead. And that definitely has been the case for us.
Excellent. Couldn't have said it any better. I think one thing that caught my attention is the summary that you had in the end. The founders need to sort of codify the DNA, the culture, the way of doing things in a way that, when you do bring the right set of people, and it becomes a way of life, it becomes a second nature. And
how do decisions get taken, right?
Yeah,
So what are values? Ultimately, they are a framework for taking decisions.
Yep.
Right. And if those are strongly and implemented and enforced, and everybody watches that, right, and they'll follow that framework. So that's what values do. They give you a framework for making decisions.
Yeah. Excellent. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Sajith, coming to you, and a little bit of a change of track here. We often believe, and we often say as well, it's important to play long game. And there are oftentimes many temptations for a founder as they embarking on entrepreneurial journey to pivot to potentially a short-term gain, and some of them are external driven as well. And when I say external, it could be the board driven, board comprising some investors who have their own their own objectives that they need to fulfill for their LPs. And in a few interactions, when I speak to some entrepreneurs, they are very clear about where they want to go, what their North Star is, and they have a vision clarity. But again, they struggle. They grapple with this dynamic of having to, get a board aligned to how they want to do it in terms of where they want to get to. So they have to make in some cases those short-term trade-offs for the short-term gains, and potentially jeopardizing their long-term thing, and that might come in the way of building a sustainable business as well. So I know you're probably smack in the middle of all this stuff. As a VC, you sit in a few boards as advisor or a board member. What's your take? How do you sort of help the startups make a right, strike a right balance?
Tricky question, Ravi. You kept the hardest question for the VC. So that's a fair question. It's a good question. I would say that a good VC doesn't let his or her founder trade off long-term sustainability for anything short-term. The best VCs don't do that. And as someone who's still learning my way through venture, I've only been here for 5 years. And the VCs I look up to never do that. That said, there's also a peculiar construct in our industry that I come in at a certain stage. Blume, as a seed investor, comes in at a certain stage. And we then look to, at a certain stage, hand it over. And it's not hand it over, it's not when I sell my shares, but I bring in a Series A or a Series B investor to come in, because the company has reached a certain scale. It needs a certain expertise, which I don't have. My strength may be strongly in getting them to PMF. The next set of person's strength is, how do you expand to another country? How do you bring in a CFO? How do you put in governance, etc.? And then so on and so forth, right? So there are downstream investors, all the way through Series F these days, I'm told, So I would say that we as early stage investors look to our downstream investors for the signals that they're giving. If the downstream investors say, hey, we are okay with this business, okay, and then we'll say, sure, we would like you to come aboard. Typically, downstream investors are very careful. They tend to be more careful about unit economics, contribution margins, etc. Because as you get closer and closer downward, you got to know that you're taking the company to an IPO. But 2021, the entire world went crazy, right? So when they went crazy, the signals that were coming from downstream investors was, we are going to invest in whatever you bring, right? We earlier, if, for example, you at 750K SaaS revenue, you were getting, for example, Series A. Now at 300, they were saying, no, just we're going to come in. And at that point, what happens is when the signals come like this, then it becomes very difficult. And sometimes, yes, I would say that we were not able to stress long-term sustainability at that point. But that said, again, I think that era is over. And if anything, we have come back to the path of long-term sustainability. So typically, it doesn't vary. Short-term and long-term sustainability go hand in hand, it's dovetailed. Sometimes it goes crazy. That era is past. Last point is that, and I go back to what Kunal said, it was a very good talk. I think I missed something very interesting. I'll probably go back and listen to the entire thing. He said something very interesting. He said, your shares are the most highest value item that you're going to sell if you look at yourself as an enterprise company. If so, what you're selling, you want to pick the right customers. Similarly, the best founders pick the right investors. And they say, if an investor comes and says, grow, and if the founder, he or she feels that's not in the best interest of my company, should actually encourage the investor to say, maybe we're not the right ones for you. It may not be easy in certain contexts and circumstances, but the good founders do that actually. The good founders push back and say, my business cannot grow at 40% or 60% or 80% quarter on quarter. It's a different business. And so I think it's up to the founder as much to kind of push back. So these are, I think, the points I wanted to say, that typically they're dovetailed. The best VCs don't encourage trade-offs, but there are times when they do happen. Yes, it did happen in 2021, but now things are back to normal, and founders have a responsibility to push and select the right investors for their journey as well.
No,
Can I add
very well
to this?
Yeah, please, Mohan, please go ahead.
Yeah. So, the point that I wanted to make is that, short-term and long-term is actually highly dependent on what is the actual business you are in. Okay. So not every business is, destined to be a unicorn, right? Not every business is destined to be a sustainable business, right? I think, you're from the Valley, you'll know this, right? How many businesses have been built purely to be sold to Cisco? Okay. How many businesses have been built by very smart people purely to be sold to Intel or to Oracle, right? So those are great businesses, but those are not independently sustainable businesses, but they were built with that awareness, right? If there is a very established ecosystem of enterprise sales that Cisco has built in the networking, industry, it doesn't make any sense for any startup that is making networking equipment or networking services or software to actually go build that ecosystem. There is a ready ecosystem. You're building a new feature or you're building a new aspect that is being offered and you go plug into that ecosystem. So in that situation, using the least amount of money required to create that and to sell it to Cisco for $200 million, $300 million is a phenomenal outcome, right? Same, how many companies do you know that Google on average has acquired one startup a week, okay, between 2010 and 2020. Most of those don't get reported at all, right? Because there's an ecosystem that's already been developed, right? So I think that strategic awareness of what is it that you are creating? Is this a feature in an ecosystem? Is this a product that fits into an ecosystem? Or is it something that is enough of a market, a big enough market? Is it a new market? Is it an existing market? Is it a market that is going to grow? Or is it a mature market that's not going to grow? Are you going to grow by taking share? Or are you going to grow because there is some new thing like an iPhone, smartphone that has come that is actually creating a new, generation of products and services? So having that strategic awareness of what is it that you're doing is extremely important. And second is the confidence to act on it. Okay. Now I'm sitting here and saying this, right? Fully aware that in my first startup, I didn't do any of this. I didn't, me and the team didn't have the confidence. We basically did what our VCs told us to do, and we made tons of mistakes, right? But, so for first-time founders, this is going to be very hard to actually, even if they have the strategic awareness, to have the confidence to act on it. But if you can build that confidence and conviction of knowing truly what is your market, if you're building a two-sided marketplace, it makes sense to burn money fast, and build those two-sided marketplace because it becomes a huge moat, right? Whereas if you're building a service, if you're building something that is not a non-linear growth thing, it doesn't make sense to burn a lot of money fast. Right. So, if you're building something where you're creating a new distribution channel that makes very difficult for others to recreate, then it makes sense to burn money fast. So I think but what I saw happen in the last 5-7 years is that every business got looked at the same way. Everybody wanting to become a unicorn and everybody spending money, without being acutely aware of what is their target market. And again, Kunal made another excellent point, I thought, which is that just because you're good at something, because people are putting the pressure of you becoming a unicorn, you're getting into 5 other areas where you have no advantage whatsoever. Okay. And all you're going to go do is burn money there and get your ass handed to you. Right. So whereas if you had stuck to your one thing, okay, maybe you would have actually created $100 million company by using only $10 million, and more power to you. That should be celebrated. Right. Whereas no, unless you created a unicorn, nobody, cares. And that's kind of the narrative that got built. So I think I just wanted to make this point that there is no one formula that applies to every business. Knowing what makes sense to your business and having that acute awareness, or, the strategic awareness, I use that term, I think makes all the difference.
No, the pearls of wisdom, for sure. It's hard for me to believe that, you did not have the science-side knowledge back when you were building your first thing, but, it's certainly bringing all that to the fore and to the table here for the budding entrepreneurs. I think the point I need to highlight in your articulation is the entrepreneur or the founder being acutely aware of the broader ecosystem and the thing that he or she is embarking on, the relevance, how it fits in the grand scheme of things. And then sustainability or a long-term view should be looked through that lens and make appropriate decision versus going with this blanket approach. I am building for a unicorn or XYZ. That's a great point. And going back to what you said, Sajith, that you should comfort many founders as well in terms of what you said, how the VC ecosystem is panning out or evolving. There are folks out there may not have an appetite to stay the course, given whatever commitments they have with LPs. They're fully cognizant and they're very transparent, saying, oh, this is not our cup of tea. This is what we are good at finding founders who are passionate about solving this problem in a 0 to 1 space. Once the PMF is attained, there are other folks downstream who are ready to look at this problem and help you along the way, both in terms of capital and other intangibles that they bring to the table for the founder to succeed. I think, the founder should look at that as well. And I think it's very comforting, very comforting. Mohan, should I leave you with some more time to catch your breath, or I have another question? I'm going to.
No, it's fine.
I know that was a very passionate articulation. I really liked it. This one is about going back to building a sustainable financial base model, or a revenue model, or a business model. I wanted to understand from you, as you build some great businesses, the importance of founders, to be looking at, establishing multiple revenue channels in the form of new customers or new monetization. Sometimes the monetization models, it could be different as well from what you started to what it should be in future, new sales channels, some new adjacencies in terms of new adjacency products and services, and things of that nature. So how important that is for a business to be sustainable. And I'm sure you've done some of this stuff yourself as you build some great businesses.
Yeah. So the way I think about it is that if you have a successful product or service, right, one that has found product market fit, one that has scaled, one that has actually is doing well, and hopefully it has a growth path ahead of it, right? So it hasn't gotten into saturation in the market, So when you have something like that, anytime you add another product, right? If it is an immediate adjacencies that you're selling to the same customer base, then I won't consider that as a new thing. It's just an extension. But if you're adding a new line of products or a new, right, you're actually taking on risk. You're actually taking on new risk, right? And the reward has to be worth it, right? So what does that mean? That means that you have to apply the same diligence and rigor to decide that as you did when you did the first one, right? Because unlike a lot of people who think of startups as and entrepreneurs as being in the risk-taking business, I actually think entrepreneurs are in the risk mitigating business. Okay, so the highest risk that you have is the day you start, right? The day you quit your other job or whatever it is, and you gave up on your opportunity cost, and you got into this and hired and brought in your first few people, that is when the risk is the maximum, right? After that, you're using all of your intellect, your energy, your team, your network, the capital that you raise, all of that you're using to actually reduce the risk and create a successful product. So now when you add a new line of business to it, then you're actually taking that risk all over again. This time it may be a little lesser because you built more capabilities. Okay, so I would ask the same question. Do you have any edge? Do you have any advantage in this? Right? Do you have any defensible, sustainable, competitive advantage in this new line of business? Does your existing business give you those advantages? Okay, if it gives you those advantages, either because you built a certain distribution, or you built certain technology, or you built certain, intellectual property, any of those things, then it makes a lot of sense. But adding businesses or adding business lines for the sake of doing it, I think doesn't make any sense, right? Now, if you have made commitments to investors, and if you have gone and raised money at very high valuation, then you may not have a choice but to actually take more risk and going into areas that you don't have competitive advantage in, and that is actually a value destructive step, in my opinion, right? You basically took something that is creating real good value and has reduced the risk and is the risk reward balance is in your favor. And then you're actually now going into something where the risk reward ratio is against you and has actually made the whole thing less valuable, in my opinion, right? So I think to the extent that you have the competitive advantage in that new line of business, you should absolutely do it. I'll give you an example. In our case, we started with the mid-career segment, upskilling for mid-career segment, people who have been in a certain job for a while, for many years, and are stagnating there. Okay, because the nature of jobs are changing, the nature of their work is changing. Unless they build new skills, they can't move beyond, right? They're stuck. That was our initial segment. So everything that we did was catered towards those, answering the questions that were their concerns, right? So as we did that, we saw that there were people from the younger ages that were coming into the and buying our products and services, right? So, and when we saw those, then we said, okay, these people are coming, but they actually have different requirements, right? They are not as independent, they're not as disciplined, they're not as rigorous about, they're still used to bad habits from college. So we said that, okay, let us cater to these people also. Our strength is that we know how learning works because we've learned that in that segment. We know how to deliver high quality learning outcomes. We know how to do that at scale. So we use those to cater to the early career segment as well. Similarly, we were finding that there were older people coming into our products as well and realize that they have different needs. They are not going to sit and write code, right? They are used to managing teams of people who do these things. So we created separate products which are derivatives meeting their specific needs. Right. Similarly, we found that there were people from Singapore and Dubai, others coming into our programs, right? And these are the early adopters. But from that, we learned that okay, there is people in other geographies and in other markets. It makes sense to cater to them specifically, right? So similar, that's how we went to the United States as well, right? So I think I think it pays to very carefully listen to what the market is telling you. Usually, the market / your customers will give you hints, right, for you to find those next set of products or next set of if you want to go into something completely new, then you better have something damn good that is a source of competitive advantage. And if you don't have anything, that's when you go with just capital.
Yeah, absolutely. I think again, I'm sort of summarizing for the audience one more time. I think the idea of building new products, it should be first looked at through the lens of figuring out some of the core building blocks that you built, and having a deeper understanding of your customer segments, and at the intersection of these two, can there be new adjacencies that you can look at, and they are largely derivatives of what you built as a core. That should be our first focus, as opposed to looking at a brand new thing, unless of course you have a very distinct competitive advantage, it's an untapped market. Again, even then it offers its own set of challenges. You're going looking at some unknown, all said and done. So that's very well put. I think that's a great point, excellent point. Just a little bit of dovetail into what Mohan said, a role of continuous innovation to drive sustainability in a business. Rajiv, what's your take? I think it nicely dovetails into what Mohan said. While you may be looking at same set of products, same customers segments, but what worked today may not work tomorrow. There's always the competition lurking. So the innovation, you need to be on the innovation treadmill, and what's the role that innovation plays?
Absolutely. So, just to build on what Mohan was talking about, right, so there are two things that can happen. One, in the external environment, the forces have changed so much that you have to reinvent. There's no other option. Second is you build some capabilities that you can extend, right, and create more value off of. In both of these cases, completely agree with Mohan that whatever you're trying to do, make sure that there is sustainable competitive advantage. Otherwise, you are risking what you've started with and getting into an unknown territory where the competitive set could be completely different, and you've opened your battle lines across multiple channels, right? So that's an important one. So talking about the space we are into experiential learning. We create simulation-based learning for large organizations to upskill and reskill people at scale, create impact at scale. So what I find is, in terms of innovation in this space, there are usually the 6 C's that we care about. The first one, the more obvious one, is content itself, right? And content itself, when you think about it, it's morphing, right? So maybe back in the day, there was e-learning, and then there was mobile learning. And a lot of those changes have happened in terms of what that core content is. Second is the context. When you're selling to a B2B audience, their context is continuously changing. So you need to keep innovating on the context as well, not just the content. It may not work after some time. Then the channels, right? Today, you need to reach, learners, especially in the hybrid work environment. You need to be able to reach people through multiple channels. And from a learning standpoint, I find that communities are important. That's the fourth C. It's not just about an individual learning. How do you increase efficacy of learning through communities? Then you've got curriculum or the course material itself, right? So curriculum is how do you structure it in a way that can be consumed well? And even in this, the format of learning is undergoing a change, just like in cricket from test matches to one-day international to T20. The format is changing a lot, right? So, unless you keep innovating on that front, we might be left behind. The last one is consumption, right? And so ultimately you have great content, like, courses from great places and all of that. But then is it consumed? End of the day, there is problem of plenty today, right? Do we understand the psyche of the learner to innovate at the edge to make sure that consumption is also happening well? And the latest entrant, we all know, we cannot have a panel these days without talking about ChatGPT, right? So if you think about the disruptive power of that in the learning space, right? So the other day I was looking at, can you create a session plan for customer centricity? There it was, right? 1 day session plan, a 3-hour session plan. No, I don't want this. I want a 2-day session plan. It can create it for you. Can I get a case study on an automobile company that is facing labor union problems? There you go. You got that in place. So I think that's very active in terms of content creation, and also the role of AI in creating deep immersive experiences. And that's close to the space we operate in. Today, we talk about metaverses, right? So and it's no longer cool if we just talk about simulations. People want the next thing in terms of, hey, do you have the same thing in metaverses? So there's no end to all of this. I think it comes back to what is real for your business. And ultimately, there is an innovation diffusion curve. You don't want to go too ahead of time, and you don't want to lag behind. So, and that's the strategy here, right? It's not always important to be the first person to be innovating, but after you have seen enough success in that, could just be your strategy, right? When do you want to get into that innovation ring is where the strategy lies. But across all these 6 C's in the edtech space, there is enough and more to be done in today's context.
Excellent. Thank you. I don't know how we are doing on time. I do have one other question, and then I don't know if there are any questions that are coming up. We could also look at those. But I have one question, but I get a ping from Nishit that we are running out of time. But can we take one question, or should we wrap it up now? I don't know if Nishit is... Oh, yeah, he's saying please close. So I do have a couple more questions, but I think this is a very enthralling, engaging conversation, and truly an eclectic panel. And people who've been there, done that, and seen different perspectives, and all the participants and all the audience participating in this session, and me included. Very grateful to all 3 of you, Mohan, Sajith, and Rajiv. I really enjoyed this engaging conversation and some great insights, and a lot to glean from this panel discussion for the entrepreneurs, and hopefully they find it as exciting, as insightful as I found it on this conversation. Yeah.
Thanks, Ravi. Thanks, team NIIT, for putting this together.
Yeah.
Thank you all.